What's up, boys? So patch note day. They released the patch notes yesterday. What I will do, however, is I will link this one to you guys in the comments, and I will link the Google Doc in the comments as well. But basically, what this is going to be going forward is that every time that KR releases a patch note, especially leading to global, I will remove the stuff that is Talandre and basically things that we will not have to worry about in at least like 4 months or so minimum, I'd say, before we get Talandre in global, and have it be more geared towards people who are waiting for global and things that I think might affect global, right? So Talandre stuff I'm going to remove completely, and then the T2 stuff obviously is going to be included here along with the Archboss weapons, and that's potentially something that we will get in the global version. And the devs themselves have said that they want to keep NA and Korea as much as possible, like 1-to-1 in terms of patch notes, not updates, but patch notes. And yeah, so hopefully we get the same patch as Korea. If not, like maybe a week behind or 2 weeks behind is, I think, is completely fine. And yeah, so first thing on the agenda here is the equipment changes. What they're trying to do now is they're making tier 2 equipment and also the Archboss weapons go all the way to plus 12, right? And then what's going to happen here is it's going to make tier 2 equipment and Archboss weapons a lot more appealing. There were times before where certain T1, like Nirma's Greatsword, was actually more appealing than, say, like Bellendir. Over the extended period of time that the game has been out, they wanted to make tier 2 and Archboss weapons more and more appealing, and so that, which explains the consistent like buffs that they had before to like Bellendir. So you know, certain Archboss weapons were a lot weaker before the very start of KR, and then they've gradually become a lot stronger and even more stronger now thanks to this change. So this kind of just makes me think that there was really no need to nerf T1 equipment because they were just going to make tier 2 more appealing anyway, right? I think making tier 2 stronger and then making them go from like plus 9 cap to plus 12 is actually more than enough to make people want to go for it, right? So let's say like your sword and shield, for example, going from plus 9 to plus 12, that means that your weapon will now scale higher in terms of overall like shield block, for example, right? So let's say Nirma, Bellendir, very even when it comes to shield block, but once you get Bellendir to plus 12, that means it has higher overall stats, and of course with the scaling it's gonna have higher shield block as well, which just kind of makes it best in slot, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think there was any need to nerf any of the T1, especially the T1 dungeons, because we're not gonna have the Talandre stuff in the tier 2 stuff anyway. And then the next one we have here is this is just buffs to Talandre equipment. We don't have to worry about this one, but essentially the short version of this is that they added a fourth line of base stats to the Talandre like tier 2 equipment, just to make it even more stronger. And then they buffed the current like stats that they have, like strength, dexterity, and all that, to make it easier for people to reach the new level, the new like 70 stat breakpoints. So that's where they're trying to do this right now. The one we have here now is random dungeon matching. So I do mention in my guides that, you know, if you're farming for a specific type of gear, you're most likely going to be spamming that dungeon. But if you're trying to farm your dimension like rings, for example, that is it's a really easy ring to eventually get. It's just going to be a matter of time. It's going to be one of the best rings that we're going to have equipped for quite a while, actually. This is really good because in order to get those, you need to do all the dungeons, right? So this is good and encourages people to still go through random matching so that you can get the buffs for it. And then the one we have here is probably the biggest one for a lot of people. It's the costumes update. So now costumes are going to be shared all throughout your account, not just like throughout your server, but all throughout, you know, your account, basically. It's good because like for somebody like me who, you know, is not a whale, I'm going to be playing multiple classes, right, to try to farm. It's really nice to actually be able to wear those costumes. That way I can hide the fact that I have like scrub gear when I'm trying to tank those dungeons, which I can tank even with less gear. It's just that, you know, people tend to judge just the moment that they see that you don't have like top tier gear. The dyeing and the pattern stuff is not carried over to your other accounts, which makes sense. because unless if you wanted to have a uniform look for all your characters, then you just gotta do it on that other alt. Then that's really all you need to do. And the main currency that you use for the dyeing and the pattern stuff anyway is just farmable from all the purple like books and little lore stuff they find around the world. So you just go around every time you see those things, just grab them if you want that currency, and then you'll have that as well, right? And then the weapon changes. So Dagger actually got kind of like, it's like a mix with Dagger. So poison injection, it got buffed pretty like well, but then Mortal Fang, they made it so it now loses the critical hit chance, and then it makes it more like defense reduction, right? So if you get more value, the more people are hitting that target, like in PvE, but it feels more like a PvP nerf because you would rather have that critical hit, right? So I think that's kind of a nerf there. A lot of these other stuff here, it looks like it's just going to be kind of like PvE buffs. You now overall, I think all the weapons will deal more damage to regular mobs, because if you read the skills before, a lot of the skills will say deals 15% more damage to bosses, deals 30% more damage to bosses. So now what they're going to do is they're gonna do increased damage to normal mobs as well. So it's a really good overall PvE buff for us. And yeah, it's the same thing with Greatsword, same thing with Longbow. Boss damage to, monster damage. Crossbow, I feel like this is a big buff. This is a big buff to crossbow. This extreme rapid fire is merciless barrage. You guys, if you forgot what that is, you played OBT, you played like hyper boost server. That's the spin to win skill that crossbow has, that we're wiping a lot of people in the early game when people don't have traits yet. It's not going to be the same way in the late game, but in the early game, that was the one that was wiping a lot of people, basically, right? So, and then just a bit of a buff there. The effect adds an effect that finds a target whose movement speed have reduced for 2 seconds when hitting them. Wind Stealer is basically one of your omnipotent skills. It's if you looked at your skills, it's going to be the ones to the right, and they're the ones that require a special skill book in order to level, right? And then Living Overlap, I'm not sure what Living Overlap is actually, so I'm not going to speak on that for now. But Mark of Mortality, so they changed Mark of Mortality, where before if people were trying to stack it's not working the way that like it should, or the way that they intended. So what the real intention was, actually, if somebody puts a mark on a target and then another person puts a mark on a target, instead of just like canceling that one out, what they're going to do now is that mark will do all of its damage in one go, kind of like a big quick burst, and that next mark that's getting applied will refresh the cycle all the way down to the max duration, and it's gonna do the full round all over again, right? And then Staff is just gonna be another overall PvE buff. Same thing with the other ones. Wand and Tome, bit of a bug fix, and then Absolute Barrier interaction with the Kenzaijin's Musou song. It's actually called differently in game. This is just like a rough translation, but that's not something that we have to be concerned about, because of the fact that we're not gonna get Talandre maybe like 4 months in or something like that, right? So we don't care about that right now. And then Sword and Shield, bug fix, so provoke doesn't miss anymore. So if you noticed in OBT and you noticed in the hyper boost servers, especially when you were leveling up and you were trying to provoke mobs that were of a higher level than you, because you have a higher chance to miss, your provoke was missing. It's never supposed to miss. It's never supposed to miss, right? Because why would a mob aggro skill like miss when you're being the main tank? It doesn't make sense, right? So they decided to fix that already. And then Immortal Pride, the issue where 20% in life regeneration effect was applied when applying the protection of the Immortal specialization has been fixed. We don't really care about that as tanks. We honestly you probably never even felt it, to be honest with you, because nobody really builds towards that to make it actually count, right? So, and the Shot of Victory, this ended up being just a tooltip issue, so no big deal there. And then the guild changes. So the guild changes are actually really good, because before, the way that these quote-unquote relationships work was that like guild A, like I could be friending guild B and C, and that's my friendship, like relationship, but then guild C could be friending like A and then D and E, and completely leaving out B, right? So it's kind of like a weird dynamic. But what they're going to do now is they're making it more into like an official alliance where it's like a category, like you're in a box now, and there's only 4 people, like 4 guilds that can fit in that box, and that's basically it, right? So really good change. I think it puts these weird alliances, these weird official slash unofficial alliances more in place than how they used to be. And the events changes for level 50 events, and they're basically adding special resistance metals. If you don't know what those are, they're basically crafting materials. You need 40 of them in order to craft a tier 1 purple. Not the dungeon ones, but like the elite like resistance armor that you get from completing the level 50 quest, for example. So you might be able to use it for traits. It's really good because you would usually get this from, let's say, like world bosses. So they're going to add this to level 50 events now. They say 50 areas above level 50, but it actually gets applied to level 50 events too, like ruins of terrain. The only thing that I've noticed is when I went online to check it, was the fact that whenever something is co-op, even if they're a level 50 event, it doesn't give the special resistance medal. I'm not sure if that's intentional, but it didn't give it. If it's like non-co-op, like peaceful or dominion or anything like that, then it actually makes it so you get rewarded the special resistance medal. So hopefully they change that, because co-op I feel like is really, really good. It's a lot more fun than peace events where people just kind of troll each other and steal mobs. So yeah, and that's really good, especially if you do a lot of events, because then you can have more avenues for traits, which means that you could potentially trade your stuff up or sell that in the market for some lucent, right? And they added a world boss, Archboss rewards. They just decided to add precious polishing crystal. Apparently there's like a bug going on that makes precious polishing crystal it's tedious, but it's farmable, which I don't think is intentional. Now going to world boss and Archboss kind of like helps that, because that is one of the, I'd say, bottlenecks that some people have in the late game. And then the next thing is the guild requests. So all this is really is, if you notice in your guilds, when you go to like guild requests, guild quests and stuff like that, in the middle there's usually one for like events, right? You have like your first quest, which is like a kill quest of like mobs of a certain type, and then middle one is like the events, and then the third one is like the open world dungeon quest, right? So the middle one, they just make the goals in those events now to be more in line with what that guild quest is. That way you can just go ahead and go do that one event and then complete that guild quest. And the next one is Adventure Codex QoL. You probably won't even notice this if you just zoom past it before, but it's more like convenience. This makes it so you pay attention to less things, right? And then Exploration QoL changes. So now they're just going to make it so for all elite monsters except bosses, you only need to kill them once instead of killing like 16. Because sometimes you'd have to go into dungeons like 20 times to complete these quests, right? Which is crazy, because you're limited to how many you can do. For boss monsters, it's been changed to 7, so it's a lot less than compared to before. And what this means is basically you get the gold from it, the skill books from it, stuff like that, and it just makes it so progression is faster. Especially if you're also taking advantage of that random dungeon matching, you'll get to complete these quests a lot faster, a lot smoother, because of the buffs that come with it. And then some UI changes. They're just making it so the chat box is more customizable. That's really all there is to it. And then material conversion. This is the one where you dump all your stuff that you don't use and you're not going to dissolve. And you kind of do this whole gacha thing. If you notice if you watch or if you've seen like what Resonance does, that's basically where you get like a lot of the materials from. What they're going to do is they're gonna let you put in all the materials, dissolve it so it's not staying in your inventory the whole time, and they let you collect them as points, right? So you're not trying to collect like enough stuff to get to tier 5. Now you can just start dumping points in there, and then you can go into like one big gamba session later on if you want to. And this one is for fishing, just more clarity in fishing. It's good to see that getting worked on. Runes and hammers, it's just more QoL, so you can go from your bag, and then it brings you straight into the interface. Skill book quality of life changes. Again, this is just more convenience, more quality of life stuff, so you can get to the interface a lot faster. And skill mastery due, which is what increases your mastery for your weapons. So they make it so it clutters your inventory less. That way you're not having your skill mastery dues occupy like 25 spots, and all of a sudden you're wondering why your inventory is full, right? This one's kind of weird. They just I didn't think that Terror Bird Meat was that bad of a name. I think the new name, New Meat, is worse. But the good thing about this is they are adding more monsters that drop some cooking ingredients. Hopefully they make the drops maybe higher too, so they're not so annoying to farm. So that's good. And then server transfers. This is all this is they tell you when the next time you can transfer is. They put like a little timer on there, a cooldown, and then it's easier for you to kind of like gauge when you can transfer next. And titles, they make it so you have certain categories for your titles now, kind of like how it is in BDO. And then equipping weapons, yeah, I'm not sure what this means, but I think this has something to do when equipping your two-handed sword or dagger. I'm not quite sure what this is, so if anybody has clarity on this, just leave it in the comments below. And then the lock-on shortcut, now they have a default shortcut for it, which is control left mouse click, whereas before it didn't have one, so you probably wouldn't even have known about it unless you checked your settings or your keybinds. And then this change right here, lastly, is just faster game start execution. They know that nobody reads the terms of agreement anyway, so they're just making it so it's more faster to launch. And that's basically it for the patch notes for everything that concerns us in global. So yeah, if you have any questions, just go ahead, feel free to leave it in the comments, and then I'll catch you guys next time.